Welcome, everyone. This is Hyperconnected, how life online affects kids' mental health and well-being. I am Dr. Jenny Radesky. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician, media researcher, kids online safety advocate. Have worked with Common Sense for many years on research and advocacy. I'm joined today by Dr. Aliza Pressman, who's a developmental psychologist and a best-selling author who runs the Raising Good Humans podcast. We need good humans right now. Then we have Dr. Scott Kollins, who is a clinical psychologist and chief medical officer for Aura, the online safety platform. And then Isley Jett, who is a youth content creator. So we are excited to talk about what it feels like to be hyper-connected in today's digital world. I'm just going to start to frame this as, let's think of hyper-connection as both when teens and young people want to be online a lot, or also when platforms want young people to be hyper-connected and online a lot. Let's also talk about the design reasons that sometimes teens can't feel like they can pull away. So teenagers in the US, based on Common Sense data, spend about 8.5 hours per day using screens for non-educational reasons. We can all get upset about all that time spent and worry and just tell kids to stop using it so much. I always tell folks, I work a lot with the American Academy of Pediatrics, that in order to understand and intervene around screen use, we have to understand what's driving it. What does all that time mean for that young person? Let's start a conversation about what's driving it, what effect it's having on them. So are they connecting meaningfully, or are they consuming passively, right? Like, we should be helping teens figure out whether, they're aware of how it feels when they're online. Is that use amplifying the positive stuff in their life, or is it an avoidance tactic because their parents are stressing them out, or they don't want to do their homework? Right? And again, from a design standpoint, is all that time an exploitation of the young person's attention or their emotions when they're doom scrolling? Or is it really, supporting their curiosity and exploration? So we're going to have a conversation that really gets at these kind of emotional and psychological drivers of why kids are online and how to support them. Okay, so we're going to start with Dr. Kollins. We all have a sense that if we're spending a lot of time online, adults included, that we're not our best selves, right? We might be irritable, it might be getting in the way of other things. Kids, I have a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, they can be testy. My 12-year-old, after a day of video gaming on a snow day, doesn't know where his body is in space, right? And he just is like all over the place. So you've been looking at some data on this through Aura, and you've developed something called the Digital Wellbeing Index. So how can you tell from the data, from how kids are using technology, about when things are okay and all that time is time well spent, and when it's getting to be too much?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I have a 13 and a 15-year-old, so I'm right there with you on what happens after a snow day and we get a lot more of those in North Carolina than you guys do in Michigan. But anyway, we've been really, really interested in this question because I think one of the things to keep in mind, and it's really hard because we want easy sort of guidelines, and we want like easy to follow, easy to remember things, but every kid is different. And every kid is going to be impacted by the way that they use their devices differently. So as a platform and as a company, as we're trying to build tools to help parents and kids kind of get a handle on how their technology use is affecting them, we really wanted to take a data-based approach, like you said. And so the way we did that is we actually have an ongoing study where we're gathering data from kids and families across the country. We've got about 900 families enrolled now. And we give them our product, which allows us to track really a lot of information about what the kids are doing online, how they're spending their time, not just the total amount of time, but a lot of other detailed metrics. How often are they picking up? How often are they switching back and forth between different apps? When are they using it during the day? And through our study, not only do we get all that information, but then we collect information from the kids themselves. So we find out how are they feeling about their own well-being, about their own psychological distress, about their loneliness and social functioning. And with that number of kids, we can start to build sort of predictive models to say, oh, kids who have these patterns of use tend to report lower well-being, and now we can report that back to parents. So that's the approach that we're taking, which I think, to highlight what you started with, it really takes an individualized approach, because in addition to taking all of those different sort of nuanced usage patterns, we look at different developmental levels, because the way an 8 or 9-year-old uses their device is very different than the way a 16 or 17-year-old uses it. So all of those things matter.
So it's like a person-centered analysis. Like, what are the usage patterns that correlate with a decrease in this young person's well-being?
Exactly.
And then what do parents do when you give them that feedback? And they're like, your kid's not doing so great. Like, how do you package that so they don't just take the phone away? And do you like give them some tips on how to talk with their kids? Sorry, this was not scripted, but
no,
I'm adding it.
I know, and it's like,
so
I know we could go deep on this, but so thank you. I hope I know our product team members are in here, so this is part of what we want to move towards. We're actually just rolling this feature out today, live in product. So, but we really want to we really want to go beyond just, hey, here's a number, your kid's not doing well, good luck. but to provide, and we do have resources and articles and places where parents can get some information. Our partnership with Common Sense Media is a great source of that. But we really want to build that out more.
Great. So I'm going to move on to Dr. Pressman. So in your work with kids, like, what does this experience of hyperconnectedness actually feel like to them in terms of, and of course that's going to differ between different kids, but what do you see as the longer term effects in terms of well-being? And are there positives? Like, what are you hearing about from kids in terms of what this feels like and how they manage it?
Well, one of the things that I'm so glad we've already started emphasizing is just this is so individualized, and different kids are going to have different experiences with this. But I think of hyperconnectivity, and I think about yesterday when I was looking at my phone waiting for the little dots, because my daughter, who's 19, was on college spring break. And I was like, what is she going to say? And then the text didn't come. Like, she obviously was starting to say something to me and then didn't. And I was thinking, I have a fully developed nervous system and I'm incredibly self-aware. So, and I still was sort of sent spinning. And so I think that when I'm imagining young people's experiences with this constant, not just hyperconnectivity on the receiving end, but also feeling the pressure. There's so much pressure. I have to respond right away. And one of the things that makes it very difficult to say there's protected time without phones and devices is because parents feel incredibly concerned that they're disrupting connection because it's like not cool not to respond right away. So that's one thing that I've seen make a lot of kids stressed out. But I think the most important thing is that there's differential susceptibility research, and some kids genuinely have more sensitive nervous systems. And for them, that experience of hyperconnectivity is going to go through their nervous system so intensely. And then, of course, what you practice grows stronger. So if you're going through that experience over and over and over, that's what you're wiring for. You're wiring for having that intensity early on and repeated. And I think at a time when having social acceptance is so important, that can be very harmful. But on the flip side, I know a lot of kids who are using it to amplify their relationships in a positive way. They have wonderful experiences and awareness and a sense of self outside of their screens and devices. And so they're managing it. And so parents paying attention, which I know takes a lot of, that puts a lot of pressure on parents, but having that close relationship with your kids allows you to understand what that hyperconnectivity is doing.
And do you find that it's kids who might have like a more socially anxious profile, or have more lagging social skills, or have more challenging interactions with their parents? Like, are there certain kids that you find have a harder time with it, or
I mean,
any
you just,
of those?
yeah, all of the above.
Right.
And I think that those kids, sometimes what I found is that parents are really afraid because their kids are already struggling socially. So they think, well, I don't want to mess with that struggle, except for those are the very kids that need true in-person, face-to-face interaction, with the asterisk that there are some kids who are in areas that are very remote, where they don't have access to people that help them feel a sense of belonging and acceptance. And then I would say actually carefully allowing that connection is very important.
And now, Isley, I'm wondering if these sorts of experiences or stories we're telling about our patients or clients or our own kids, do these resonate with you? So you grew up with a mom who was an influencer, and so you kind of had that aspect of your family affecting your online presence. And now you have, 273,000 followers of your own on your own account. So I'm wondering, how does that feel to have a very online life, that pressure to create content for your followers? How have you seen that through the arc of when you were a younger teen to now when you're 21 and have gone to college and really have a more mature and reflective way of thinking about this?
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like my experiences are very unique, and I think they can add very beneficial, hopefully, comments to this discussion. So when growing up, my mom was an influencer, and I wasn't really involved in the planning and any of that. It was kind of just day-to-day things. But now that I'm an influencer, it is, with a 9 to 5, you're expected to show up every day, no matter what's going on in your personal life, and get your work done and be professional. And it's the same thing with social media. You're expected to post consistently, get your work done. But at the same time, I have an audience that wants me to be relatable and authentic. And so finding that balance of what to share, what not to share, can be really difficult sometimes.
And so you had told me that your mom, you're one of 5 kids, I'm one of 6, so I get it. She's an organizing influencer, like how to manage your life, which I was like, I bet my mother, who's now like 79 years old, could have done that. But how did that fit into you? Were you oldest?
Yes.
Of the 5? Yeah. So you probably were featured most,
Yeah.
and probably had the most to say. So, what did that feel like? And especially the comments about you as a teen. Like we were just talked about how sensitive teens are to this sort of external peer-based feedback.
Yeah. Well, I was 13 when my mom started posting content, and it was right before the pandemic happened. So being 13 is already just such a difficult age. And now I was in front of millions of people who were going to tear apart anything that I did, no matter what I did. And so I got lucky because my mom always had very open conversations, and I would always approve anything before she would post it. But I just never knew what other people were going to say about me. And then when the pandemic happened, everybody was isolated. I was isolated, and everybody was just scrolling all day long with nothing better to do than to tear down other people. And so that was the hardest part of it, was other people. And you couldn't control what they were going to say. So, I was insecure about everything. I didn't know who I was as a person, and now I had millions of people telling me who I was, and I was taking everything they were saying about me as the truth. And so it wasn't until I went to college and stepped away completely from social media to find out who I was and be confident in myself and love myself enough to now brush off anything that people say. But it's just insane how confident people are tearing down other people.
I know, it's brave of you to go back. I'm an introvert, and so the idea of having 273 people watching me is like totally frightening. But I think, so like, what's your advice if for teens who are online, at the American Academy of Pediatrics Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health, we say like you should start off private. We like the fact that teen accounts are default private, so that trolls, weirdos, predators cannot contact teens. But if teens want to expand beyond that, is there a safe way to do that, and a safe way in terms of these negative comments that can come from random people, or the safety of your sense of self. Because all of a sudden, I always talk about like your sense of self develops as like these set of mirrors that you have. Your parents are mirroring back to you when you're an infant. Like, oh, you're feeling this way, or you're crying, and I'm going to help you cope with that feeling. And then when you're older, they mirror you in terms of like language or helping you understand, what are you good at? Like, oh, that was really hard for you. Let me help you with like learning to read or learning to ride a bike. And then your peers become this new set of mirrors. But you know, social media can be like a funhouse mirror, amplifying like lots of things and minimizing other things that are wonderful about you. So are there ways to do that safely when you can still retain this sense of self that is so important in the teen years?
I think the best advice that I could give is surrounding yourself with people that know you and love you and support you, because the people that are going to tear you down and say negative things don't know who you are. And so if you are isolated, you're going to take what they say as the truth, and you're not going to have anybody around you to say, hey, I know you, and I know that's not true. So surrounding yourself with people who are really supportive and love you and are able to push you to be your best self and are not dragging you down. Because if people are dragging you down, you have to be surrounded by positive people, because that was the hardest part about the pandemic, was I had nobody around me. I didn't have friends who were in there with me, like helping me through these things, and they weren't seeing every comment that I was seeing. And so that was really hard. Was I was just scrolling through mean things people were saying about me, and I didn't have anybody right there in my ear being like, that's not true. Like, they're just being negative to be negative. And something that I've come to realize now that's really helpful is that if somebody is going to comment something negative, they probably formed that thought in 5 seconds, commented it, scrolled, never thought about you again. And that's been the most helpful thing for me now, because I will harp on comments. I will read what somebody says about me, and that will stick in my brain. And I'm like, that's true. But taking the time to realize they probably commented that, and they're never going to think about me again. So that's the best thing that I can do now.
I know. When I interview parents, they're like, comment sections are the source of all this unnecessary stress. And like, if that's one design change that could probably really help, is minimizing those. Okay, back to Dr. Pressman. So a lot of the pressures on social media revolve around social comparison, right? Which is a developmentally normative experience as you figure out where you are in the social food chain, as my son calls it. But it can be really exacerbated by social media. So how can you make sure kids know how to navigate that?
Well, I'm glad, again, that you said that, because it is so developmentally appropriate. And I think a lot of adults forget, and we say things that are kind of dismissive, like the only person that matters the only person that matters is you and how you feel. And so if other people are saying something about you, let it roll off your back, or don't listen to other people, when actually social comparison in appropriate settings is quite important developmentally. And if you go to the funhouse analogy, that mirror, the mirror is supposed to be in real life with the people that are in your world, and can even be a motivating factor for adolescents. It's when it becomes the funhouse mirror that it can be so harmful, and that's what happens when it's amplified on social media. So I think empathizing with that and validating that experience versus saying, don't listen to what other people are saying, like you have to really center yourself and know, like, be your own guide, is sort of like saying to, in an adult conversation, if you're upset with a partner, or you're having an argument with a teenager, for example, if somebody told you to calm down, would you calm down? You probably wouldn't, and it's the same thing. So we have to be very careful about empathizing how hard that social comparison is. I would even go as far as sharing experiences when you've gone through that, particularly if you're also using these devices. But the other thing that I think is interesting is that the funhouse mirror kind of makes the mirror look wonky and could be quite harmful. Well, now think about that when you're exhausted, because you've been online 24 hours a day and you're available for it. I actually had a terrible night's sleep because instead of putting my phone outside of my room, I was in a hotel room and I was like, whatever, it's next to me. But my gosh, it makes a huge difference. And so now if you ask me to look in a mirror, I can't see straight. I can't see what's going on. And so I think that social comparison, as long as we normalize, this is exactly how this feeling is completely normal, and actually this social comparison is developmentally appropriate. It's that we're amplifying it so much. We need to be very thoughtful about what we're giving power to.
And what about the point you made earlier about being in other spaces where it's not as amplified and it can be a little bit more of a, not as intense, not as high stakes? Because Reverend Wilson from earlier, he was talking about his daughter Amber dancing like no one's watching. And I was like, oh, that's so lovely that you just are totally free to have no one judging you, no one giving you feedback, no one giving you likes or comments or saying something rotten just because they're having a bad day. And I just thought that was a beautiful kind of metaphor for freedom when and agency and intentionality compared to now, dancing online is like one of the number one things that often draws teens in. So I don't know if there's any offline activities that or you could feel free to.
Well, you just made me think of something like, yes, gosh, how great to dance like nobody's watching and just enjoy yourselves. And it's so hard to even imagine a world like that anymore for adolescents especially. And also, in real life, just to extend the metaphor, you can also grow from the social comparison of dancing while people are watching. So when I was a teenager, I was still a dancer at the time. Things have changed drastically, and it was very serious. But we learned from each other, and feedback was incredibly important. But it was also reality-based. Like, there was potential to grow from that feedback when given in a positive way and when inspiring. And it was really important to look up to the dancers that were a little bit ahead. Let's say you hadn't started with point shoes and then you were looking to the older girls in your class or ahead of you to learn how to use them. Instead of berating yourself for not being capable of that, there was potential there. It was hopeful. It was possible. And so any real life experience where you can learn from and grow from looking up to people instead of this like ridiculous social comparison that is not apples to apples. It's everybody's best day compared to your everyday.
Yeah, and those are relationships too. It's almost like some mentorship and, that's more than these discrete bundles of likes or comments that you might be getting from other people. And Dr. Kollins, another thing your research has highlighted is a lot of kids feel this extreme pressure to be reachable and in the loop. Like they could see when someone else is typing, they can see when people are hanging out together without them, and that this is one of the most powerful forms of wanting to be online because it's that peer influence. And then, I've interviewed parents who say the biggest indicator that my kid has a healthy relationship with their phone is that they can separate from it, which is fair, but that can make you have a knee-jerk reaction to just take that phone away. You see, parents often say it's like a black box. You just see your kids on the couch, like, texting. And you don't know kind of what that means to them. So what else would you recommend other than just grabbing that phone and taking it away and saying it's being punished? Are there different gradations? I love how Larissa May talks about like it's not an on-off light switch. There could be a dimmer here in how you deal with not punishing, but consequences if there's overuse or it seems like it's getting in the way of stuff.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think to start, like even prefacing this, like sitting here with Isley, I feel a little self-conscious about, here I'm going to offer my advice about what it's like to be a 21-year-old in a world that I have no idea what it's like. Because we are the first generation of parents that, we're flying blind. Smartphones were introduced 10, 15 years ago. And so we're applying all of our sort of rubrics of parenting and setting limits based on a world that is gone. So I think, number one, we have to keep in mind that, until we're in your shoes, which it's really hard to be, we're not going to know exactly what that experience is. It reminds me, I don't know if some folks in the audience might have seen or read the book Behind Their Screens, which is a tremendous read. I highly recommend it. And it's a survey of teens, and it just really gives a sense of what life is like when your digital life is completely interwoven with your real life. So so I think keeping that in mind as a parent, I have to keep that in mind with my own kids, which is way more difficult than it is being a chief medical officer. But I think that your comment, Jenny, about this real pressure. I mean, we've been, as part of our research, we've been measuring a construct called digital stress, which is a real thing. And it's all the things that you just described. It's fear of missing out. It's connection overload. It's being so vigilant that I can't miss a notification. It's approval anxiety, like how is my next post going to be received by my friends? And this, like, it is a real thing, and it scales with other important aspects of how kids are reporting about their functioning. So kids with lower overall well-being or psychological distress have high levels of digital stress. And this, again, this is something, I mean, for us as parents now, you put your phone away, I might miss it, and it might be a pain, but it's just not gonna affect us in the same way. So I think that just having that in mind, and also keeping in mind, and Aliza, you made the point, every kid is different. And so what might work for my kid might not work for your kid, might not work for Isley. So I think just having that individualized approach is so important.
Can I make just a follow up on this idea of it's not only like pressure to connect with people, but also there's so much content out there. The woman next to me on the plane yesterday, I'm not judging her. I sometimes see what people are scrolling on. She scrolled on Facebook for 3 straight hours on our flight. And I was like, Facebook has endless content. This is not judging her. I was like, how does Facebook not run out of content after 3 hours? And so we have to recognize the marketplace that's out there that wants our attention, that wants kids' attention. I'm a early childhood researcher, and we just had a piece in the New York Times about all of this AI slop that's now targeted at kids, because on YouTube mostly, because there's such a market for it. Kids are in front of YouTube, parents are exhausted. And it's almost like the content farms know that kids are watching and they want to kind of scroll and have a brain break. And then you get skibbity toilet and brain slop and AI nonsense. So I almost feel like, could there be some resistance on the part of young people to be like, I don't want there to be a market for all this nonsense that's being targeted at my young brain. I don't know. And I want to kind of contrast that with the thoughtful creators who are really trying to tell a story, offer guidance. Where do you ever hear teens, either in your clinical work or the studies you do, talking about just the nonsense aimed at them?
Yeah, yes, and I have these conversations with my kids about it because they recognize it, and I do think, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but I think that there is some groundswell and sort of recognition that maybe this isn't the best for me, and maybe there's some other things that might be more reinforcing or more might help me out. Attention is a currency in a massive economy, and we know that, and it's like everybody is competing for it.
So again, not to judge the people who are looking to pass time on their airplane, but you could also have a design nudge that's like, you're all caught up. You can go do other things.
I've now taken it when I walk through airports, or if I'm in public, I have this, I don't know, it's probably unhealthy obsession, but I just look around for the people that aren't heads down looking at their phone. And it's just fascinating because you just don't see it. You go through a crowded airport, 99% of people are sitting here even when they're walking and running into things.
So, all right, so back to Dr. Pressman. When you're, what would you add to this in terms of when parents feel panicked and they're seeing their kid, they're worrying they're overusing their phone, they're worried that there's this correlation, this kind of person-centric correlation between this device and your mental health right now. It doesn't feel like a good mix. What are the steps to take? How do you suggest that they kind of enter that conversation and look for ways to understand what that unique teen's experience is? Because that's going to be key to helping address the underlying issue.
For sure. And I just want to echo Isley. I too feel so self-conscious because I'm I'm 100 years old, so why don't we just ask Isley? But I will say that we have got to, as the adults raising young people, have our own self-regulation systems in check, because the panic that is happening, and I understand, I have a 15, 16, 18, and 19-year-old. So like, this is a big thing to panic about, and I totally understand. And also, it does nobody any favors. It's not solving anything. And in fact, it makes us look so dysregulated that we aren't taken seriously by young people, because they're like, why don't you figure out yourself? And then we come back to us and have a proper conversation. And I really believe that there's a lot going around on social media right now, and in the zeitgeist of like romanticizing and deifying the experience of, I'm Gen X, for example, how amazing our childhoods were. And it's, and how destroyed young people are today because of technology. And I wonder how that must feel to young people, thinking that we're like, we had it all, and we are incredible as a result, and our mental health is stable and strong, and so I think the first thing about our panicking is that if we do not regulate ourselves so that we can co-regulate with the young people in our lives, starting early in childhood and all the way through adolescence in this experience, I don't know that there's any conversation to be had. And then, to your point about on and off switch versus dimmer, I think that there's a lot of extreme reactions of, on one side, it's just like, genie's out of the bottle, like, ship has sailed, oh well, or I'm canceling it all. And one experience I had was actually with my best friend in the world. Her daughter is a thriving, extraordinarily social person who has an incredible real life, social life. She also uses social media. I had a conversation with them, a few years ago, because I guess I wasn't excited that she had TikTok. And so her mom took it away from her very abruptly. And then this wonderful teen in my early adolescent in my life called me the TikTok taker. And she was so annoyed. And I said, and they fought about it for years. And all's well. Everybody's doing okay. And their relationship is incredibly strong and powerful. But I was thinking, in that particular case, their relationship was much more important than the TikTok taker, and so I think that that's something that panicked parents can also think about and translate it however you want. That was one example of the TikTok taker, but getting our own self-regulation in check, and then being available to be curious and open and learn from young people, learn from, what they're getting out of this and what is kind of making them feel like, I want to reject a little bit of this and not be taken over. I would rather that than the sort of doomsday, and also this narrative that like we had it all figured out back in the day and our childhoods were epic. Yeah.
So from 3 Gen Xers to you, can you please, I like to joke in my talks that the biggest tech innovation of my childhood was call waiting. And I had 3 older sisters, and I was like, yes, I can know if my crush is calling, and he never did. But help us in terms of the last word here. What do you want adults to know? The thing I love about that Behind Their Screens book, which we bought multiple copies for our Center of Excellence.
I did the same for my team.
Everybody read this. You have to, it's so good because they end every chapter. What teens wish adults knew. So, what's your last word in terms of, what adults should walk away from this presentation? Here you have parents, you have educators, you have advocates. What might we be missing about what it feels like to be a young person online today?
First off, it makes me feel so much better that you guys are self-conscious sitting next to me, because when I got the email saying, here's who will be joining you, doctor, my heart dropped. I said, oh, what could I possibly bring to this conversation that these people who have been studying don't know? But that's a great question to end on. So it is such a complex question. There's so many things that I could say, but I think the biggest thing is, 1, encouraging your children to surround themselves with friends who are supportive and loving, but also being mindful about the way you speak about yourself and others. Because if they look up to you and they want to follow in your footsteps, and if you're constantly talking negatively about yourself and about others, they're going to start to do the same thing. You know, I was just talking to you about this. If somebody sees a video and their parents are constantly making comments about people they're seeing out in public, they're going to think it's completely okay to say, I've heard my mom say this and this fits this video, I'm going to comment the same thing. And it just kind of creates this cycle of they are learning from you how to interact with others. And so if you are, they want to do what you were doing. And so being very mindful about how you are handling interactions and how you, especially about yourself, because if you talk negatively about yourself, they're going to see the same things. And they're going to say, oh, well, if you think that, what do you think about me? And so just creating confidence and showing them confidence, I think it's really important.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists for this great conversation. And thanks all for spending time with us.